Is your staff just pressing a button every 30 days to send the next group of statements? Hello, this is Linda Burton, your Wealthy Habits trainer. The next step in the income portion of our training is managing patient statements. By limiting the number of statements sent, you automatically keep your AR patient balances cleaned up. And the added bonus? You are setting boundaries with your patients. When a patient receives a statement, they either pay immediately, pay by the due date, or wait to receive another statement. After the second statement, they either pay or don't pay. After 2 notifications, if there's no communication from the patient, the statement life cycle stops. We're going to talk about what to do with those accounts, but first, let's look at the layout of the first statement. This statement should contain all the basic information of services rendered: the patient name, the date of service, the service provided, who provided the service and/or made a payment, the amount billed to insurance, any copay that was made by the patient, all insurance payments, contractual agreement adjustments, and finally, the balance due from the patient and why they have a balance. In this example, the patient is getting a $10 statement because their copay was $50 rather than the $40 that was collected at the time of service. Any information that can be communicated on the statement is going to trigger a payment or a call to your billing office. Either way, you want to hear from the patient. Include a due date. Now, this is usually an optional feature within your software. Be sure to turn this feature on because people respond to a due date. Another optional feature is this aging section. With Wealthy Habits procedures of managing patient statements, you really don't need this. However, if your software does not give you a choice, make sure you're aging from when the balance turned to patient responsibility, not from date of service. Include instructions on how to pay by credit card. Make sending a payment by mail more convenient by enclosing a self-addressed return envelope. This is a small expense, but a great return on investment. A professional-looking statement with all the information needed to pay the bill will stimulate quick pay. You have the design of the first statement. Now let's run through a scenario. For the purpose of this training, let's say you sent 30 statements. Of those 30 statements, 18 people paid within 30 days. To the remaining 12 patients, you want to send a second notice. This notice needs to have a completely different look, a different layout, different wording, and even a different color of paper. All of these things evoke a different response than just getting another statement. Here's an example of a second notice. You can see that it's more of a letter format. It includes the patient name and account number, the date and amount of the statement we're following up on, and how to make a payment online or by mail. Now let's go back to our scenario. Of those 12 patients, 7 paid within 30 days, and 1 patient set up a payment plan. By attrition, you're left with 4 unpaid accounts. The statement life cycle now stops for those 4 patients, but internally, they get a little more attention. Give all unpaid accounts a courtesy phone call. The phone calls can be made by a staffer, or many offices now use an automated calling service.
Hello, this is your doctor's office calling to remind you of your outstanding balance. Please call the office at your earliest convenience.
It really depends on the size of your practice and what's the most cost-effective. Continuing with our scenario, 1 patient paid from the courtesy phone call. So we're now left with 3 patients who have failed all 3 attempts to collect. All unpaid balances need to be given to you, the physician, to decide what action to take. The staff may not know your connection with the patient. Is it your neighbor? Do your kids go to school together? Maybe you told the patient you wouldn't charge them, but you forgot to tell the staff. Upon review, you basically have 3 choices. You can write the balance off to professional courtesy, and this means you're forgiving the debt. You can write it off to what I call in-house collections, and this is where you're going to place a note on the account to collect the balance prior to seeing the patient again. Or, last but not least, you can write it off to bad debt. And this is where you're going to turn it to a collection agency so they can continue the collection efforts. Now, many physicians steer away from collection agencies, but we're going to talk about that later in the training. Bottom line, unpaid balances, it's not a staff decision. It's your decision. The goal here is to get the accounts paid and off your books. You will lose money by sending monthly statements for a $5 payment. That sets up the procedure for your staff to follow monthly. Now, I want you to see how this affects the patient due accounts receivable report. By implementing the Wealthy Habits 60-day statement lifecycle procedure, you are automatically keeping these two columns cleaned up because we're dealing with unpaid balances in this column. Any accounts in these two columns should be making payments or have a reason as to why they are there, just like we talked about in the AR module. Look how powerful this is. You add structure to your staff, you keep your AR cleaned up, and you're setting boundaries with your patients. Let's make some policies on payment plans and bad debts. The reality is, sending statements every month is expensive. The postage, paper, ink, envelopes, and labor. Make it your policy that balances be paid in 2 to 3 equal payments. Whatever works for your practice and your specialty. Because paying staff to monitor payment plans is money out of your pocket. What happens when a patient is turned to the collection agency? Do you dismiss them from the practice? Or do you see them again once the debt is paid? There's not a right or wrong answer. You need to decide what's right for your practice, set the policy, and stand by it. Let's talk a little bit now about specialists, surgeons, and primary care. With specialists and surgeons, patients aren't followed on a routine basis. Therefore, the staff doesn't have the opportunity to collect the balances. The 60-day policy is imperative. With primary care, especially family practice and pediatrics, where you have several family member balances compounding, the 60-day policy can still work. Balances need to be paid, or some type of regular payment plan needs to be in place. There is no need to fill your schedule with non-paying patients. What do you do when a patient confronts you about money issues? I mean, let's face it, discussing money with patients isn't easy, especially when you're caught off guard. You are in clinic mode, and the first thing the patient wants to discuss is the bill they received. Hopefully, you can see how being involved in these procedures will put you at ease when discussing financial matters with your patients. The patient should feel you are confident with your staff and confident with your policies. You don't have to discuss details, but you can certainly put them at ease. Then, focus on why the patient is really there. After the patient leaves, it's important to get with your staff and resolve the patient's concerns and communicate back to the patient as soon as possible. This lets the patient and staff know that you do care and are involved in every area of your practice. Let's do a quick review. I want you to meet with your staff and review the layout of the initial statement and second notice. Make adjustments accordingly. Implement a 60-day statement lifecycle policy, and that means 2 notices. Implement a courtesy phone call procedure for patients who have not paid from the first 2 notices. And implement a procedure for you to review all accounts that have failed all 3 attempts to collect. Implement a payment plan policy, and you want to implement a collection policy. Most importantly, I want you to be involved. Thank you for joining me today. This is Linda Burton, and I look forward to seeing you in the next module.